What if a simple lunch break led to a tour of the stars? What if bright lights over a quiet river marked the beginning of a lifelong mystery? What if a buried metal plate from space carried a warning of global war? Or a stranger stepped from the bushes just to offer a kiss before vanishing into the sky? Tonight, we step into 4 encounters that blur the line between the ordinary and the impossible. Welcome to Strange Encounters. Our first story features a humble Italian mechanic whisked away in a black Fiat, a silent, hovering disc on a lonely ridge, a colossal mothership over half a kilometer long, hundreds of human-like beings in shimmering outfits, breathtaking views of Earth from space, and a calm, otherworldly tour of the stars, all in the span of a single lunchtime. Get ready, because you're about to hear Luciana Galli's astonishing 1957 encounter, one of the most detailed and mind-bending lunchtime abductions ever reported. It was July 7, 1957, a sweltering summer afternoon in Bologna, Italy. The city pulsed with the ordinary rhythm of post-war life, scooters darting through narrow streets, the distant clatter of tools from workshops, the low murmur of people going about their day. Luciano Galli, a modest 42-year-old mechanic, short in stature, bespectacled, a family man with 3 children, had just finished lunch. At 2:20 p.m., he stepped out onto Via Castiglione, heading back to his small workshop in a quiet, blind alley. His mind was on routine things: an engine repair waiting, the familiar smell of oil and metal. Then, without warning, a black Fiat 1100 screeched to a stop right in front of him, blocking the path. The window rolled down slowly. A tall man leaned out, dark-skinned, impeccably groomed, with sharp, regular features, a neat mustache, and eyes. Eyes so intensely black they seemed to swallow the light. He spoke in flawless Italian, his voice calm, almost gentle. "Do you remember me?" A chill ran through Galli. Yes, he did. Flashes of memory surfaced. This same stranger had appeared on Bologna streets before, always watching, always staring with that unblinking gaze. Once, Galli had even started toward him, heart pounding, only for the figure to vanish into the crowd like smoke. Now the man was here again, real and close, inviting him with quiet certainty. "Come with us. Have confidence. Nothing will happen to you." In the passenger seat sat another figure, silent, delicate-featured, dressed in a light suit, who never once turned to look at Galli. The air felt heavier, the street noise oddly distant. Every rational part of Galli's mind screamed to walk away, run, call out, but something deeper, an inexplicable pull, a curiosity laced with dread, made him nod. He climbed into the back seat. The door closed with a soft, final click. The Fiat glided forward, smooth and silent, the engine's hum muffled as though the world outside had been wrapped in thick glass. They left the city behind, heading toward the rugged, isolated Croara Ridge, 57 kilometers away, a desolate place of musky rocks and sparse scrub where few ever ventured. Galli's pulse quickened. The drive felt endless and instantaneous at once. No words were spoken, only the growing sense that something irreversible had begun. At 2:30 p.m., they stopped in a lonely clearing, and there it was. Hovering silently 2 meters above the ground, an enormous disc-shaped craft. Its metallic surface gleamed with the cold, shimmering gray, lights pulsing faintly along its edges like the slow heartbeat of something alive. No sound, No wind, just an unnatural stillness that pressed against Galli's skin. A metallic cylinder extended downward from the underside, touching the earth like a probing finger. An opening appeared. A ladder-like structure emerged. The tall man gestured. "Go first." Galli hesitated for the briefest moment. Then he stepped forward. As he entered, two blinding beams of light swept across his face, sharp, invasive, but not painful. "Don't be afraid," the stranger said softly. "We've just taken your picture." The cylinder sealed behind them with a whisper, and then liftoff. No roar, no jolt, just sudden, impossible ascent. Inside, the craft defied reason. Vast, circular, far larger than its exterior suggested. Smooth walls glowed with sourceless light. Instruments flickered along panels. Fixed seats bolted to the floor. In the center, a wide circular window looked straight down. Through it, Galli watched the ground fall away. Fields shrinking to patches, the boot of Italy receding, until the entire planet hung suspended in the black, blue and fragile, city lights twinkling on its night side like scattered stars. Time warped, minutes stretched into something longer, heavier. The tall man spoke casually, answering Galli's trembling questions with a smile. "How did you learn Italian so perfectly?" "Through a very good method." No fear gripped him now. Instead, an eerie calm settled in, as if reassurance was being threaded directly into his thoughts. Then came the Mothership. A colossal cigar-shaped vessel, over 600 meters long, loomed ahead. Severed cleanly at one end, radiating a faint phosphorus glow. Portholes glowed along its hull. Smaller saucers darted in and out like watchful insects. 6 massive openings lined the underside. Hangars alive with silent activity. Their craft slipped inside one seamlessly. Galli stepped out into a cavernous world. 400 to 500 beings moved about. Men and women of ordinary human height, familiar features, even hairstyles that could belong on any Bologna street. Shimmering outfits caught the light like liquid silk. The women especially struck him. Beautiful, their smiles warm yet distant as they passed without surprise. He was led through wonders, a grand hall lined with glowing scenes showing holographic maps of stars and spiraling galaxies. Serene lounges where quiet conversations hummed. The captain's quarters overlooking the endless void. Impressions flooded his mind, not spoken words, but vivid images, emotions, trajectories of cosmic paths humanity had never imagined. Their curiosity about Earth felt palpable, not threatening, but intensely evaluative, as though weighing our small, noisy world against something vast and ancient. Hours passed, or minutes. Time had lost meaning. Then, abruptly, the return began, the saucer descending to the exact clearing he left from. The cylinder lowered, Galli stepped out. The craft rose silently and vanished into the sky. The Fiat and its occupants were gone, as if they'd never existed. He drove back to Bologna alone, the city unchanged, horns blaring, people hurrying, oblivious. But for Luciano Galli, the ordinary had cracked open. He kept silent for years, the weight of it too heavy to share. Until 1962, when journalist Renato Albanese interviewed him for the Sunday Courier. Galli signed a declaration. No dream, no hypnosis, just 3 hours and 10 minutes of his life stolen and returned. "What I have told you is the naked truth," he said quietly. "I don't care what anybody says, the story is true. You can believe it if you wish." A mechanic from Bologna whisked to the edge of space and back in the space of an afternoon. A black Fiat leading to a mothership. human-like visitors who watched us with quiet, measuring eyes. Was it imagination? A clever echo of earlier contactee tales? Or did something truly reach down that day, slipping into the cracks of an ordinary life, leaving behind questions that refuse to fade? What if the next stranger who stares a little too long, the next unexpected invitation, carries the same pull? What if next time the invitation is yours? In the stillness of a January night, an ordinary fishing trip on the Cape Fear River became the beginning of a mystery that would follow one man for nearly 2 decades. A story of bright lights that defy explanation, missing hours of time, and an encounter so strange it would thrust him into the spotlight of UFO research, television, and endless debate. This is the story of Chris Bledsoe, a man who insists he saw something real and hasn't stopped talking about it since. In January 2007, Chris Bledsoe was a 46-year-old businessman and commercial pilot living in Hope Mills, North Carolina, near Fayetteville. He'd come to that river seeking quiet, a peaceful break from personal and professional pressures. On that cold night, he and 4 others, his teenage son Chris Jr. and 3 co-workers, drove out to the Cape Fear River to fish, unwind, and just breathe. The riverbank was quiet, the ground cold, and the late afternoon light fading into dusk. In the woods nearby, silence hummed like static in the air, the kind of silence that settles deep into your bones. At one point, Bledsoe walked about 75 yards up a dirt path away from the group, toward the trees. That's when he looked up and saw them. Not stars, not aircraft, but 3 brilliant lights in the sky. They appeared as glowing orange spheres at first, then blinked into position with impossible speed, hovering silently above the tree line. Neither aircraft nor flares seemed to fit the description. Bledsoe returned to the riverbank in excitement, pointing the lights out to his son and the 3 men with him. They turned to look and were struck with equal awe and fear. The objects didn't drift like conventional aircraft. They hung in place for long minutes, quiet, motionless, yet unmistakably there. Then, witnesses reported something even stranger. As the men fled toward their truck in panic, they saw a larger, glowing object, oblong with protrusions, hovering near the trees before it quietly lifted and vanished. Here's where the story diverges from a simple lights in the sky sighting. Bledsoe later said he believed it had been gone only about 20 minutes when he walked back to the fishing spot, but his companions insisted it had been gone 3 to 4 hours, long after sunlight, well into night. They even drove down the road looking for him and found no trace. This unexplained gap, a missing time discrepancy, is one of the enduring puzzles of the case. Then came another reported sighting. Bledsoe's dogs began barking furiously at something unseen in the backyard. Following them into the woods, he said he came upon what he described as a small humanoid figure, glowing faintly with reddish eyes. His son also reported seeing glowing orbs and strange movements amid the trees. These elements shifted the event from a UFO sighting to a claimed close encounter. The case quickly drew the attention of MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, which sent investigators to document witness testimonies. 3 of the men who were with Bledsoe submitted accounts that corroborated the sighting of unusual lights descending and hovering silently near the riverbank. According to MUFON reports, the multiple statements were remarkably similar in describing the object's behavior and appearance. It's worth noting that at least one television documentary, the Discovery Channel's UFOs Over Earth, featured portions of the case, giving the story broader exposure, though Bledsoe himself later said he felt the program portrayed him in a way that discredited his experiences. Months later, Bledsoe agreed to undergo regression hypnosis with psychologist Dr. Michael O'Connell. Under hypnosis, Bledsoe described an auditorium-like room with lights and controls, and beings at least 7 feet tall. When asked why they were with him, he told the hypnotist, "They're my guardians," claiming they looked after his well-being and stayed near him during his sad times. He also said smaller glowing entities were their children. MUFON spoke positively about the regression results, though many skeptics point out that hypnotic regression is not reliable evidence of objective events, but instead reflects memories shaped by suggestion and interpretation. In the years since that night, Chris Bledsoe's life took a very public turn. He wrote and self-published UFO of God, the extraordinary true story of Chris Bledsoe, blending his original encounter with continuing experiences he described as spiritual or transformational. He's appeared on multiple TV shows, including the History Channel's Beyond Skinwalker Ranch, where neuroscientists recorded brainwave activity while he observed orbs in the sky, interpreted by some as telepathic or indicative of communication. Bledsoe claims repeated encounters with glowing orbs, entities, and even spiritual figures he calls the Lady, saying they deliver messages and guidance. His narrative now mingles UFO phenomena with spiritual meaning, prophecy, and metaphysical interpretation. Here's where it gets complicated. The original sighting of unusual lights over Cape Fear River is backed by multiple witnesses and formal investigation notes, but the more extraordinary elements, humanoid entities, healing experiences, spiritual messages, aren't independently verifiable evidence. Hypnosis, personal interpretation, and subjective experience play major roles in these claims. It's also true that Bledsoe's presence in public UFO circles, his books, conferences, and media appearances has become a source of income and a central part of his identity. Critics and skeptics question whether that dynamic might influence narrative embellishment or shape how experiences are recounted. At the same time, Bledsoe is a rare figure among experiencers precisely because he chooses to speak openly. Many people report unusual sightings or encounters and stay silent. He has built a life around sharing his. That willingness to front his story publicly, even under intense scrutiny and community blowback, is unusual and part of why this case remains prominent. So, what do we make of the Cape Fear encounter? Was it a genuine unexplained aerial phenomenon seen by multiple men on a riverbank near Fayetteville? Or was it something interpreted through personal emotion, spiritual meaning, and evolving narrative? The lights are documented by multiple testimonies. What happened next, the missing time, the beings, the guided spiritual connection, remains in the realm of subjective experience. In the end, Chris Bledsoe stands as one of the most talked about UFO experiencers in recent decades, not because his story is simple, but because it refuses to stay in the shadows. Whether skeptic or believer, his case invites us to look at the night sky and ask the same haunting questions humans have wondered for centuries. What are we really looking at when the lights come down? He had buried it, a small metal plate covered in symbols no one could read, buried deep in the woods like something dangerous, like something that wasn't meant to be found. And yet, months later, he would be standing in that same forest, digging it back up, after receiving instructions from a mysterious man in a black cape who claimed to represent beings from beyond this world. This is what happened after Richard Hoagland's first encounter. In our last episode, Strange Encounters episode number 52, we covered the first part of this story, but here's a brief recap in case you missed part 1. In December of 1965, Richard Hoagland was walking his dog across a frozen lake near Uddevalla, Sweden, when he saw a disc-shaped craft hovering above the ice. 4 humanoid beings, 3 men and 1 woman, approached him. One of them touched him with a small device, and the chronic kidney pain he had suffered from for years instantly disappeared. They left without explanation, but that was only the beginning. 9 months later, Richard felt something he struggled to describe. It wasn't curiosity, it wasn't a decision, it was a pull, an internal pressure, a certainty that he needed to return to Grundhusen Lake, the exact place where the first encounter occurred. On August 24, 1966, before dawn, he drove there almost mechanically, as if guided. And when he arrived, it was there again. This time the craft was smaller. It hovered silently. Beside it floated a figure, suspended as though gravity did not apply. Richard recognized one of the beings from the first encounter, the older male, but standing near the craft was another presence he had never seen before. Tall, broad, commanding, this figure radiated authority. When it spoke in Swedish, but something was wrong. The mouth movements did not match the words. Richard later said it felt as if the voice came from the craft itself rather than the being. The message was urgent. A global war was approaching. Tensions between world powers, specifically involving China, threatened catastrophic conflict. And somehow, Richard had been chosen, not as a politician, not as a soldier, but as a messenger. The being handed him a small metal object, a thin metal plate, roughly the size of a business card. Its surface was engraved with strange, hieroglyphic-like symbols unlike any known alphabet. The markings were precise, deliberate, but completely unfamiliar. No explanation was given as to how it worked, no demonstration, just instructions. Carry it with you at all times. Richard was overwhelmed. He was a construction worker, a rock blaster, a practical man. He had not asked for this. Fear began to outweigh wonder. Instead of accepting the mission, he did something very human. He buried the plate in the woods, hidden, out of sight, as if distancing himself from it would make the entire experience disappear. But the experiences didn't stop. The beings had told him to relocate, to travel to the Bahamas, specifically to Little Exuma. Against all logic, Richard and his wife Gunvor sold their home and made preparations to move. It was an enormous decision, financially and emotionally, based entirely on instructions from entities no one else could see. Even the journey was strange. On the flight, they noticed 14 men dressed like priests. They were similarly dressed, similar in appearance, similar in posture. Too similar. Richard felt they were watching him. When the plane landed in Nassau, something even stranger happened. The 14 men disappeared. Not gradually, not casually walking away. They were simply gone. No trace at baggage claim, no sight of them exiting the airport. They had been there, and then they weren't. In Little Exuma, Richard waited for further contact. Days passed, nothing happened. No craft, no beings, no instructions. Silence. Doubt crept in. Had he misunderstood the message? Had he imagined it? Had he uprooted his life for nothing? Eventually, Confused and financially strained, he returned to Sweden. Back home, Richard connected with members of the Swedish UFO research community. Some believed him, some supported him. One individual even offered financial backing if further contact occurred. This external validation reinforced Richard's conviction that what he experienced was real. And then came the strangest figure of all. While driving, Richard picked up an elderly man hitchhiking. He wore a long dark cape, a wide-brimmed hat. His appearance was theatrical, almost otherworldly. The man introduced himself as Father Ra Paz. During the drive, he displayed knowledge he should not have possessed. Details about Richard's experiences, about the metal plate, about the Bahamas journey. He claimed to represent the overlords, the same beings that Richard had encountered. The atmosphere inside the car shifted. At one point, they drove at extremely high speeds, far faster than felt safe, yet the vehicle seemed unnaturally stable. Then, in one reported incident, Father Ra Paz simply vanished, gone from the vehicle, but he left something behind. A package. Inside were instructions. Instructions that led Richard back to the woods, back to the buried metal plate. Standing once again in the forest, Richard dug into the earth. The plate was there, untouched, cold, heavy with implication. He retrieved it. From this point forward, his sense of being involved in something larger only intensified. Father Ra Paz would reportedly reappear at unexpected times, sometimes offering guidance, sometimes delivering cryptic warnings, sometimes disappearing just as suddenly. There were suggestions of orchestration, of a carefully staged operation, yet there was no physical evidence that could definitively prove the existence of the beings. Only Richard's testimony, only his conviction. The metal plate symbols were never conclusively identified as belonging to any known language. No confirmed analysis proved extraterrestrial origin. No global war erupted as predicted. So, what happened? Was Richard contacted by non-human intelligences attempting to influence world events during the height of the Cold War? Was he manipulated by human agents using elaborate psychological staging? Or was this the story of a man profoundly altered by a powerful experience, one that reshaped his perception of reality? What makes the case compelling is not just the craft or the beings, it's the escalation, the summons, the object, the priests, the vanishing man in the cape, the buried artifact, the relocation across the world, the sheer depth of commitment to something unseen. Richard Hoagland's life was permanently changed after 1965. Whether the source was extraterrestrial, psychological, or something in between, he lived the rest of his life carrying the weight of that encounter. Some stories fade with time. Others grow stranger the deeper you look. And Richard Hoagland's story remains one of the most unusual contact cases to emerge from Sweden, not because of flashing lights in the sky, but because of strange, persistent, deeply human consequences that followed. Imagine this. You're strolling down a quiet country path at twilight, minding your own business, when a shadowy figure steps out from the bushes. But instead of danger, he offers a handshake and then pulls you in for a kiss. This isn't a dream or a prank. It's the chilling yet strangely tender encounter that left one French farmer forever changed. Let's hear it straight from him. It was September 10th, 1954, around 8:30 in the evening. Dusk was falling over the fields near my hamlet in Mouriéras, France. I'd spent the day harvesting oats, pitchfork still in my hand, as I headed home along that familiar sunken lane, thinking of supper and sleep. The air was crisp, the bushes rustling softly, and everything felt normal until something unexpected happened. Out of nowhere, he appeared right in front of me. A man about my size, maybe a touch shorter, clad in dark, form-fitting clothes that seemed odd in the fading light. He wore a helmet like those for motorcyclists. No straps or flaps. I stopped dead, clutching my pitchfork, heart racing. Was he a wanderer? A thief? But no, he didn't look hostile. He came closer, hand outstretched, palm up, as if to say he came in peace. I relaxed a fraction, and he grasped my hand in a solid shake. Not rough, just firm. Then, quick as anything, he drew me near, pressing my face gently to his helmet. He planted kisses on my cheeks, one side, then the other, as the French do in that brisk, friendly way. All the while, he mumbled words I couldn't make out, strange, garbled words, like no language I'd ever heard. I muttered a shaky good evening, but he didn't reply. Instead, he bowed his head a few times, polite-like, and backed away. I stood there, shaking not from terror, but from the pure oddity of it. He turned, walking off with a slight sway, vanishing into the nearby bushes. That's when I spotted it. The machine. Long and cigar-shaped, maybe 4 or 5 meters wide, dark and metallic, gleaming faintly like zinc. No glow, no exhaust, just parked quietly behind some farm gear, as if it had been there all along. He must have climbed in, though I didn't see how. A moment later, the thing rose off the ground with a faint hum, soft like bees buzzing. It went straight up at first, then angled west, picking up speed faster than any plane. In a blink, it was out of sight, swallowed by the night sky. I staggered home, face drained, hands trembling. I confided in my wife, begging her to keep quiet at first. But the rumors spread in small places like ours. The police showed up, grilled me, scoured the spot. They found zilch. No tracks, no scorch marks, just an oil spot that might have been from my harvester. Still, they took me seriously. I'm no liar or drinker. I'm just a farmer who crossed paths with something not of this earth. He was kind, almost gentle, like he wanted to greet me before vanishing back to the stars. Decades on, I still ponder it. Why me? A sign? A mix-up? I'll take that mystery to my grave, but I'll never shake the memory of that starry kiss. What an eerie tale, right? Antoine Mazaud was a hard-working farmer in his mid-40s, living a quiet life in the French countryside with his wife and family. No history of tall tales or seeking attention, he was known locally as reliable and down-to-earth. He reported the incident promptly but shunned publicity, sticking to his story through police questioning and later investigations like UFO researchers like Amy Michel. Now, for a quick critical look, skeptics might chalk this up to a hallucination, perhaps from fatigue after a long day in the fields, or even a misidentified human in odd attire, maybe a pilot or eccentric traveler. The lack of physical evidence like clear footprints or craft imprints fuels doubt, and the oil stain was easily explained away. But Mazaud's unwavering sincerity, with no motive for hoaxing, stands out. The intimate details, the handshake turning to kisses, the unintelligible mutterings, don't fit typical pranks or delusions. Plus, it aligns with patterns in other reports from that era, adding a layer of credibility. Speaking of which, this happened amid the explosive 1954 UFO wave in France, a frenzy of over 300 sightings crammed into just a few weeks that fall. reporters poured in from across the country. Glowing orbs, cigar-shaped crafts, and especially humanoid encounters where beings were described as peaceful or curious, much like Mazor's visitor. Newspapers buzzed with headlines, investigators scrambled, and even the French Air Force took note. It was a time of Cold War jitters and space race hype, but many cases, like this one, defied easy explanations, leaving experts divided between extraterrestrial theories and mass suggestion. Whatever the truth, it turned France into a ground zero for the unknown that year. Thank you for spending your time with me tonight. If you enjoyed this episode, consider subscribing and joining our growing community of curious minds. And if one of these encounters stayed with you, share it with someone who still looks up at the night sky and wonders. Until next time, keep looking up.